So
I'm scared to ask.
Well, before we get there, we'll ask you first impressions, because people are overthinking it now. But when you saw what Mueller did on Friday, what was your gut?
Well, it's historic. This is the largest indictment of anyone trying to interfere with our elections. And so on that part, it clearly is very significant. I think you also have to admit it's very significant that there is no collusion nexus established in the indictment. There's been a lot of indictments, a lot of pleas, and we still haven't seen that nexus. Now, obviously, I've always been skeptical about the obstruction and the collusion aspects as likely criminal charges against the president. Those are not the only things he's being investigated for. But I do think it's significant after a year we haven't seen that type of nexus.
At the same time, we don't know what's coming next.
That's
with
right.
Bob Mueller. We never know.
That's right. And clearly the investigation on collusion and other issues are going forward. But each of these indictments gives us a little peek at the hand, and that card's not in there at the moment.
So let's talk about the Bill Clinton John Edwards problem that you're talking about.
There's an excerpt we'll read right now because you write, you discuss the possibility of another legal threat to President Trump, and this time coming from payments to a former porn star and a Playboy bunny. And you write in part this: some of the greatest threats to a presidency come from the outer edges. That was the legacy of Bill Clinton, whose adultery led to public dishonesty and ultimately perjury. The $130,000 payment to Clifford and the $150,000 payment to McDougal could present a serious legal threat to Trump. The confirmation of this money, coming from his lawyer and his friend, could be viewed as a circumvention of campaign finance laws. Just ask John Edwards. Given the Edwards prosecution and the pending Common Cause lawsuit, there is an obvious basis for alleging a possible crime related to these payments under the campaign finance laws. For a White House known for self-inflicted wounds, the situation could not be more precarious as the White House issues categorical denials.
So just to remind those that don't remember, John Edwards got in trouble legally for paying somebody he was having a relationship with, I think, to be a videographer, used it out of campaign funds.
Well, it's very similar in a lot of respects because Edwards had two people who participated in getting money as third parties to his mistress and the mother of what turned out to be his child. That was treated as a criminal campaign finance violation. So Mueller could easily view this as within his mandate. It deals with a campaign finance violation. He's gone pretty far to go after Paul Manafort. This would not be as far as he's gone over in that direction. And so he could investigate it. The problem for the president is that the White House has been issuing these categorical denials. And that's where you get into trouble. That's where Bill Clinton got into trouble. So you've got false statement potential here. You've got the campaign finance issues. You also have his attorney, Cohen, who said, look, this was my money, not the campaign's money, which I wrote, a week ago. It actually adds to the problem. I mean, there's now serious ethical issues as well as legal issues.
So there's confirmation that the payments happened. Is there any confirmation on what the payments were for?
That's the issue. That is, Mueller very well could ask. He could say, look, I want to know, was there steering here? Was there an agreement with the campaign? Was this an effort to silence or bury these stories? Those would be within his mandate.
Right, and just for people that are listening, the problem with the Cohn payment is if it didn't come from the campaign, then that's an in-kind contribution, or would probably be seen as an in-kind contribution to silence a critic of the final stretch of the campaign. And then, of course, that becomes, as you said, a bigger problem. So when you talk about this being a problem, obviously we're not talking about the moral side of it, because that's baked into the cake with Donald Trump. I remember us saying after the Access Hollywood tape, when people were saying it was the end, we're like, no, it's not. This is a guy who said he wanted to have sex with Princess Diana after she was dead, after she had died, because he liked her skin. I think most Americans have baked it into the cake. So not a moral problem, but more of a legal problem.
Right, that's the Bill Clinton problem.
Well,
no,
I'm saying you're not here saying that voters are going to be shocked by a man who said I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. You're talking about prosecutors.
Look, I voted for Bill Clinton, but I testified at the impeachment hearings, and I said that he could be impeached for lying under oath. I didn't care what the subject is. I don't care what a president lies about. When you go under oath, it's a crime, and it'll put Republicans in a very tough position if he trips that wire. It doesn't mean that he will. I mean, he can thread this needle. But with all the attention at collusion, the more serious threats may, in fact, be on the edges. Things like campaign financing, these types of campaign finance violations alleged by groups like Common Cause. Those are the things that get you as a president, if you look historically.
You know, I'd like to agree with you because I worked on the Government Reform Committee at the time we were investigating the Chinese money with Clinton. What got him was the moral stuff that you're talking about, the lying under oath. So you're right, the outer edge is what the Republicans wanted to get him on. They couldn't get him on. So they got him on
so funny you say that because people always talk about Monica Lewinsky. I said, that's not the scandal. The scandal is the biggest DNC contributor was able to send advanced missile technology to China.
I worked on a North Korean
and he couldn't get a single defense agency or a single intel agency to approve it, so he got Ron Brown at Commerce to approve it.
Yep.
That was the scandal. But you're right. It was the lying about the personal at the end that caused that. So where do you think Mueller goes next?
Well, that's the question, is whether he has the intestinal fortitude to want to get into this type of issue with a former Playboy bunny and a porn star. Mueller is a sort of tied down type of guy. I don't know if he really wants to go in that direction. He could. I mean, and particularly with this lawsuit, with the Edwards case, there is case precedent there. Right. I actually disagree with the interpretation of campaign financing that came out of this last indictment. I think there's real free speech issues that have to be addressed. I think it goes way too far on that. This would not be as much of a stretch. I mean, there's precedent here for that type of allegation.
Now, wasn't Edwards ultimately released?
Actually, he was acquitted on one count, and they ended up deadlocking on, I believe, 5 counts, and they didn't go back and go after him. I was actually critical of the Edwards prosecution.
I was too.
Yeah, I thought it was a weak prosecution.
I thought it was a weak prosecution, and we've had the Justice Department over the past 10 years. You could look at the John Edwards prosecution. I thought that was excessive. You could see what happened to Ted Stevens. You can see what happened to all of these people around Abramoff. I knew several young people on the Hill whose political lives were ruined by over-aggressive prosecutors. They got in front of judges, and the judges were like, why are you even here? You got to be careful being too aggressive on this.
Well, Joe, I think in this case, on Friday, what Mueller's team did was brilliant, in my opinion. First, he has to deal with the misinformation campaign. That is that the president has been saying this is a hoax. We now have H.R. McMaster and others saying, no, it's real. And I think the first thing that they did was lay the foundation, as any good prosecutor does. He's laying the foundation for what I believe is going to come next. And I believe, we don't know, that could be broad, it could be narrow, but I don't think he's going to go in the direction of sexual conduct. He might, but I think he's got some really good stuff here with the Russia situation. It's a cyber attack against our sovereignty. I don't know why we're not talking about that. And it's appalling that the President of the United States continues to this moment to not say a word about. I'm appalled.
Soulless. Jonathan Turley and Sophia Nelson, thank you very, very much.
Thank you guys so much.
Still ahead in his tweet storm over the weekend, President Trump sought to blame Democrats and the Obama administration for Russian meddling in the 2016 election. We'll have President Obama's former Secretary of Homeland Security, Jeh Johnson, weigh in on that next on Morning Joe.